So since you're so new to macros, let me give you the bare bones basic introduction that I think is going to give you a huge leg up in the competition. I'm going to start from scratch with just a simple Fusion comp, animating it, setting it up for a macro, and then creating that macro, all just in one video. If you're brand new, this should help you a lot, and if you are a little bit used to Fusion, maybe this could help you still. If you don't know, this video is part of a series of videos releasing on the same day, where I'm going over making a macro, just from scratch to the end. This video is going over making a macro with the built-in basic default stuff you'd have to do with DaVinci Resolve by going in using the Macrofisto, going into a code editor, and manually adjusting every little thing for your code to make your macro super customizable. But I'm also releasing a video where we make a similar kind of macro, but using the new macro creator. So you get to see a huge comparison between this video and that one if you want to check it out. Also, I have a short video just comparing the two where I point out some interesting key points about the new macro creator that really help you learn. But if you want to actually learn about how to use the new macro creator in detail, definitely check out that video because it's definitely going to help you. But alright, let's recap what we're making. We're going to be making something that looks like this. We have toggleable buttons. We have a layer list that shows the current layers that are being generated. With each of the layers on, we're able to reorder them super simply in this layer list. We have tabs with different icons and without a settings tab or a controls tab. We have an animations page with a bunch of crazy animations. And we have a colors page with all the colors for all of our different things. Today, we're going to be doing this and even more with images and other things as well. Let's take a look at that. So what we're doing is we're trying to replicate the subscribe button animation that happens when you actually press subscribe on YouTube. And what happens is this border comes out, it spins around a little bit, and then some particles pop up, and then it all goes away. And then it switches from saying subscribe to subscribed, right? Anyone who's subscribed before has known this, which if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if we spin this, we can see we have all those colors in here that are going to spin around. And then when we want to switch, we just have to change this foreground background, do a gradual change on this because it gives us cool little like fading effect between the two. We're going to so to explain the animation, I guess, we're going to be having this hand, this cursor, come up in this regular cursor form, I guess. And then we're going to be having it hover over this, and then instead of it looking like this, it'll look like it's about to click it. It's going to look nicer than that. I made that really fast. And then you're going to click it. It's going to probably shrink, pop back out, and then everything's going to happen as it is expanding out from that animation. But today we're making all of the different parts of this. So we're making our mouse, we're making our buttons, we're making our border, we're making the particles, and we're adding it all into this one Fusion comp so that next episode we can animate it in the way that I just described. All right. This has been long enough. Let's finally get into making this actually pretty interesting Fusion comp. Like I said at the very beginning, if you're brand new to Fusion, you're going to learn a lot in this video. But if you have used Fusion a bit, you might learn a thing or two. So in a new Fusion comp, let's go and start with the text and the subscribe button. So let's start by dragging in a text plus node from the top left. You can get it from right here in our quick access bar, or we can get it from doing shift space, or you can also do a control space to give you that exact same menu. There's not really difference, there's just different ways to access it. Or you can get that same stuff from over here on the effects panel in the tools. You can find it under generator. First, we want a button that says subscribe, and we're going to keep it on the default fonts because I believe they use the Open Sans font anyway, or maybe a Google version of it. But this will work for our needs. It might be needing to be slightly different, maybe needing to be medium instead of bold. I'm gonna get semi-bold just to ease my worries. Let's go ahead and make this. Black. And before we continue, let's go ahead and get our reference. So what we want to do is go over to a browser, and we want to get a reference of pressing the subscribe button so that we can see what it actually looks like when somebody presses subscribe. We won't be taking every element of this and converting it directly into our animation, but we will be taking aspects of this as inspiration for our animation. So on Windows, if you press the start button, Shift and S, it brings up a screenshot menu. And you can do screenshots that are rectangles. So you can draw a rectangle on the screen that makes a screenshot. the full window, the full screen, which if you have two screens, it does both, or any freeform. So like a masking like this, but however the heck you want. Or we can do video, which does just a rectangle area. So we can just do the entire screen or a small section, and it will just record in whatever resolution you selected when you made that box. So we can make our box. I'm going to make it kind of big so we can make sure we get all the different parts of our animation. We can do that, and it has a little box here. And now we can press our start button up here. We can select if we want to have system audio or if we want to have a mic recording, and it selects all the mics that you have set up. We don't want any of these on, so we'll just mute them and press start. It tells us where our little area is, and it gives us a little countdown. We can just come into here. We can even do our little test for our cursors. So we can have regular cursor template right there, and then a little clicker cursor template right there. And then we can click it, and we can see our animation. We're not going to do every part of this. Like, we're not going to include the bell, and there's a few different parts of the actual sparkle particles that we're not going to include as well. But if you want to, I can show you how, and it's not too difficult. All right, let's start building this. So now we have a little template for our buttons. So if we play this, we can see this is when we're doing our setup. So this is our little template for our mouse, and then this is the template for our clicker. You already heard me say this, but I'm saying it again just for clarity. So the way that these pop up, it's not really confetti, but we're going to do more confetti than we're going to do just like glitter sparkles. Because I feel like showing you the particle system more as a whole may be a little more helpful for you. There may be much better ways to make the confetti. So if you know a great way to do it, let me know. I would love to update this for the next video, by the way. But what we're going to do is, we may not change it to be green, but we do like that sliding animation. And there's not really a border on this. I might actually be wrong about the border thing. You know what? That's fine. We're going to stick with our plan, but if we want to do an animation that replicates this exactly, let me know, and I'll do this in a future series. But I should have looked closer at this before making my little animation. I went off of memory, not off of actual example. That's why you always go off of reference if you want it to look like the actual product. Now, we just want it to look cool, so that doesn't really matter all that much to us. So we just want to replicate the colors. So this first button is going to have white text with a black background. And how you make the backgrounds, you can obviously do like a background node with a rectangle mask and make the rounded edges and all that stuff. But then if you have the text change, for example, it'll get smaller or bigger or whatever. So what we're actually going to end up doing is going over to shading and going over to 4, activating our blue border over here, changing from level from word to text. So it takes up all of the text in the actual text box. Round out those corners some, and let's change our background color to be a bit more of a black. I might change it to be a slightly off black. There's nothing really is ever off black. Off black usually puts people off when they're looking at UI elements. So that's a pretty good black right there. We can then change maybe our horizontal to be a little wider. Yeah. We can then also change our position of it to be a little further down. I think that looks pretty good for our button. Right, we can then just increase our size of our text to make it even bigger. Drag this all the way down here, and let's make a duplicate. But we want to have this duplicate reference back to the this original text. So if we change anything about our second text, it would reference back to the first text, or vice versa. So we can copy this just like normal with a Control-C or right-click and copy. And then we can just do a Control-Shift-V to paste an instance. So let's go ahead and merge those together so we can see them both on the screen at the same time. Go over here to Instance Text 1, and we want to come into here, right-click and de-instance. Probably don't need to explain this, but it's going to make sure that it allows you to change this, but it won't change the original text. So this still says subscribe. This now says subscribed, but if we change anything like the font right here, it would change that font right here. Come into shading, go to element 1 and right click, de-instance group, and then change the color to black. And then change 4's color to a close to a white. And then I'm actually going to go back and change this to an off black again. Maybe a little bit blacker than it was before. Okay, so now we have 2 different buttons. And we can see we actually messed up somewhere. We didn't de-instance the group here. So what we want to do is just de-instance the color group now. Go back into here, and we just want to reset this to a nice and dark color. Put it around there. Sure. Now, if we preview both of these on the screen, we can see that they both look pretty good. They both look like the subscribe buttons. Not the subscribe buttons of old, but the subscribe buttons of now, which is fine. I miss the little red subscribe buttons. If you do want those as an option, obviously you can change the colors. It's not too hard. So a dissolve node can perfectly like go between two different images. So what we can do is we can bring background and foreground down, helps to preview the right thing in the window. We can just reset this to our regular timeline size by just merging everything we've done so far over an empty background, just like how we've done just there. We're putting the background in the yellow input and everything else in the green input that has caused it to merge over the timeline resolution. So now it is the timeline resolution up on the top. All right, now we have these two sitting in here. They're centered, they're looking great. We don't really need to be making sure that they're lined up just fine, just because of the way our animation is being set up. We kind of blend between the two to where you can't really tell what's the difference between the two of them. What we have to do now is add a border to this. So the way that you can add a border to things really quickly is, well, first off, in this, you can quickly just add this, make it an outline, or make it like a bordered outline, make the thickness really big so that it's visible. Let's turn the blend down. And like we can try to like fiddle around with this to make it work right and stuff. And we can try and we can kind of get this to work and it can kind of do some things, but it's kind of more annoying than helpful. And it's just like a huge headache because it doesn't know the actual border of what we're wanting to border. Now, obviously, if this is a one-time thing, feel free to do it in there if you want to have the time to fiddle around with it. You can also turn this into a macro, and it's really easy to use. So let's go ahead and add a background node, and we can feed this directly into the background node mask input. This is going to give us a solid, basically a map view of whatever we're plugging into it. So if it has some transparency in there, you'll see the transparency and all that stuff. This is now the color of the border. We can then add a erode dilate node, which kind of does what it sounds like it does. So when you increase the amount, we preview it on the right screen, mess with this amount here, it's going to increase and decrease the amount. Now all we have to do is merge the original image back over our border and then preview our image. Let's change our background to white and let's just extend our border and look at that. We have a border. When it comes to this weird curve that we have going on, we can see this weird flat edge that appears whenever we use it. We can change filter to circle, and then I'll change it to actually match the edge of our curved edges. And that is the plain and simple of how you can add a border to anything. 3 simple nodes: merge, erode dilate, and a background. Really easy to do. Let's just plug this into our output, copy these, and paste them on over here. And there we go. Pretty easy. But what we're actually going to do is we're not going to paste them. We're just going to do another instance of all the nodes. So that if we change anything about this first border, the second border changes with it. We're going to hop into here and actually we're not going to de-instance anything this time. Everything that is in here is just as it should be. Let's come into here to background 2 and change this from type to 4 corner. And now this is going to give us a 4 corner gradient that we're able to position however we want. So we're going to choose like some pastelish colors, random kind of, and then we can change the image scaling to be a little bit smaller so it matches our actual background. So if we come into here and unselect auto resolution, we can just bring these down to the exact size of our guy, and now our colors are way stronger. Now the only problem with making it this tight is when we go to actually animate this how we want to, which let's move these up. And let's add transform nodes in here. And we're going to, once again, instance the transform node. And if we do a rotate in here, we got some weird stuff going on. So what's happening here? Well, for one, we aren't rotating the color, we're rotating the entire image, which is not what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a workaround. So if you're not going to rotate your background, don't worry about this. This is really just for this specific, instance. Let's scoot these up a little bit. I also need to put this down here, it looks like. So now between the background and the transform nodes, we can move these transform nodes down. No, we need to move the transform nodes up with the background, sorry. We can add my special opacity node. If you don't know what the opacity node is, if you watched my very first macro video where I teach you guys how to make your own nodes, then I teach you guys how to make an opacity node. What we have to do is put the yellow into the output of transform, then plug this back through. This is a mask input, so all we have to do is take our mask from the background and put it into this opacity. Now if we were to copy the opacity, or first we need to then put down opacity in here so that it actually affects. If you were to preview this now, we can see that the inside is invisible. So if you were to get rid of the actual image, we would have a cutout of it. So now we can copy the opacity node and once again instance it right here. And then we also have to press apply mask inverted. All right. Now if we were to spin this around, we can see we're almost getting the effect we want, but we're still getting things cutting off. What's going on here? Well, what's happening is we're not quite a big enough size. What we need is to be a big enough size to where we can fit this way and this way. So what we got to do is we got to make this a nice vertical. So I'm guessing 90. Come into our background and we just got to increase or change the height until we're meeting the requirements. So a little bit past that point. Now if we spin angle, we see all of our colors dancing around in our little circle. And if we were to preview this one as well, we can see the exact same result happens to us here. Or actually, if there was any color at all. That's what's... There we go. Now if we actually plug things into the right places, now things are working correctly. Okay. All that looks just fine. I think the text is done. Go ahead and start tracing out our cursor. So we can very easily use a shape node for this, but we're gonna go and jump into using a regular polygon node, just so it's a little bit easier for those who don't know anything about how to use like a spline tool, so that you get a little more introduced to it a little bit easier, because this is just a spline tool. This is just a polygon tool. You can draw similar to the pen in like Photoshop and Illustrator. Similar to, but not quite. So now if we were to put this on up here and give us a background for a color, plug it in like that. And if we were to draw any shape into here and then preview this, we can see it gives us that shape with the color of whatever the rectangle is. Just like how we showed you with the borders here, how the masking turns it into that shape. When you mask into a background like this, it turns it into the shape of the background, or it turns it into the shape of the polygon. Pretty easy, right? So now all we have to do is reset this node and just draw a mouse. So we can easily bring back up a reference. We can maybe even take screenshots and pull them into the software. So we can grab this, did our hotkeys again. We're going to screenshot, break some laws. And I'm just going to drop our screenshot into here and we're going to make our next one. Let's take in our other one. We're going to use these as references. So let's go ahead and drag them both into here. Let's make sure that we know which one's which. So this one is our pointer, this one is our clicker. And we want to put this over a background so that these are going to look like they're on the same scaling. So masks are really weird. They really like it when you have the same scaling as whatever you're like tracing. So you don't have a really forked up mask. And it's kind of annoying, but it also kind of makes sense. You don't accidentally mess things up, but you can also easily mess things up this way too. I don't know. It's kind of a lose-love situation. What we can do is we can just start then tracing this, and we're going to trace the inside, not our white border. Doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be good. Just want it in the same shape. And I think that looks pretty good now. If we look over here on the screen, this is our final result. It is a nice green cursor. There we go. And now if we were to put this through a background generator like this one, we can, or a border generator like this one, we can then easily make our little white border. Thankfully for us, I have a little simple border plugin. This isn't released or anything because it isn't really Fusion friendly, I would say, for many reasons, but mostly because buttons like this aren't liked in Fusion. I would need to change how the button works, but that's not important. There we go. We have a duplicate of my cursor that I have right here. It's not perfect. Like I said, that doesn't really matter. We're going to just do the exact same thing. Get another polyline, get another background, keep our background black, put our polyline into there, preview that on one, and let's get traced. This one's a little bit weirder. Hands are a little weird. In fact, curves can be a little weird. What we got to do is do either side of the top of the curve, then we can get a good looking curve going. So if we do either side of our curve like this, and we want to try to make them as straight as possible, so holding down shift makes a straight line, and we can do that all the way down to here as well. We're going to make sure that we have our curves for down here. So 2 lines there, 2 dots there, 2 dots there, and so on. Down here, we want to dot here, and then we probably want to dot down here. Then we want to dot, I'm going to release shift now, where we want to dot maybe up here, maybe one right here, and I'd say one here, and we can come up here and finish her off. Okay, this is where things can get a little bit more complicated. This mouse was really easy to make because there was a lot of sharp edges that didn't need any forms of curvature. This is all curve, baby. Every single one of these needs a nice curve. If we just select all the parts, do a Shift S to do a smooth, we can see, man, isn't this mouse just beautiful? That looks horrendous. That looks great. I mean, that looks just fantastic. I don't know who wouldn't love that. Okay, let's make this look a little prettier. Let's make this actually our primary focus point for the moment because it's going to need a little bit of TLC. I would say this is pretty good. Let's maybe make these a little bit closer to like the inside of the black. I would say this is maybe a good arch, maybe make it a little bit taller to avoid getting the weird swings that we're getting with this part of our bar. If we were to undo this and hold down Control and then drag this around, we can just control one side of our handles. Go ahead and bring this up a little bit, grab this one, bring them up a little bit too, try to make it symmetrical. For these that are swinging out, let's make these as straight as possible. These need to be straight sticks of the fingers. And then we want to just make sure these are all looking good too. And it's pretty much all that we're doing for the rest of the time for the hand. We are just adjusting these until they look good, making sure that we're using Control to separate what we're doing to each of the different parts of our line, so our handles. Okay, and after a little bit of TLC, we are left with this monstrosity, which is a little bit closer. If we even fit it with this a little tiny bit more, which I missed this, you can see it looks pretty much like it should, right? It looks pretty close. All we have to really do is add our border onto this one now, which we probably want to make sure that this is an instance border so that it can be the exact same. We now preview our border. Let's just make both of the borders a little bit bigger so we can fill in the gap. Now, that looks like how it kind of should. Might not be exact. Like this is a little wonky. That's pretty much it. This is maybe a little bit thicker, but I'd say that looks pretty good for a good little quick trace. Now we have to make sure we can see between the two of them. So if we remember back to our different images here, we are dissolving between the two, right? We're just going between the two, just like that. Well, that's exactly what we want to do here, but on the dot. So what we do is we bring in our Resolve node, connect everything up, and when we preview this, if we were to keyframe this to happen over one single frame, see it instantly jumps into the clicker. So that is how we're going to accomplish that effect. All right, and I think that we are even lined up pretty well. What I might do is come into our hand, bring in a transform node, and just make it a tiny bit smaller in place. I think that's going to look good, and maybe even bringing the pointer part over a little more. I'd say bringing it down a tiny bit. I just want to line up the 2 points that are actually pointing and clicking on that specific part. So when you switch between the two of them, you can hardly tell something's really changed. Let's try to animate this again really quick, just to get our kicks in. We can see it looks pretty smooth because it looks like it's coming from the same place. Sell that reality. And then we can add a transform node at the bottom down here. Connect this up with the merge node. Now you have a centered mouse that you're able to move around with a transform node. If we were to preview our merge, our media out. So let's scoot this on down here, out of our way. I'm even going to make our borders a little bigger. I might even go with 0.2. So we have the button, we have our border, and we have our mouse. That switches between the two different types. Now all we need to have is particles. So what we're going to do is start over here by just dragging in a P emitter, a P turbulence, or a P direction, and then a P render. These are all of the particle nodes that we're going to actually need in this video. Let's connect all of them up in the direction I have them laid out here. Let's merge this over the rest of our stuff. We can change it to blob, and we can see all these little blobs come flying down. Or we can change it to bitmap, which gives us this little input here, which allows us to actually add a shape for each particle to iterate over. What we can do is we can come and do our little polygon tool, which we've become quite acquainted with, drag it into the emitter itself, and this little mask data turns into the shape data for our particles. Draw a random rough shape that looks like it could be part of confetti. So maybe not that shape, maybe more of a rectangular shape like this, maybe. What we have to do then is plug this into a background, and that gives us both the color and the shape of our little guy, of our little image. If we let it go, it just kind of falls like rain. We just have to change a few different things in this to make it look like it's coming up and then falling back down. We're going to have two different spouts, going out to the left and one going out to the right. And they're both going to fall down after that. So if we were to take out p direction, and if we were to play through this, we'd have particles appearing but not really going anywhere. P direction is what's making them all fall, and then the p emitter just creates them, and then the p render just allows you to see them with everything else. Probably make the drop a little slower, so bring down our strength. Yeah, that's pretty good, but maybe a little slower. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Maybe a little fast. Okay, that may be a good speed for our little confetti. I'm going to go into here to color controls, go to color variants, and just increase the variance on all of these all the way up. Okay, so I just discovered that if you don't have the background down there, they will actually do what I'm telling it to. So the background was giving it a solid color and it wasn't allowing it to actually change the color of anything. But since we're now giving it mask data, it's now accepting the fact that it can select the colors itself. At least that's my assumption. I actually don't have any idea why it's doing that. But if we were to change any of these colors to be like a, I don't know, like a bluish or like a greenish, we can see we have a big variety of colors going from green to black and white. So green is more like the middle point, because now we have a bunch of color variants of all different kinds. What we can probably do is we increase this out a little bit so that the darker ones are a little bit more transparent to make it feel like you can see through some of the ones falling down, to make it a little more interesting. We're also then going to add some size variants and some different things. I'm also going to center this. All right, so I just made my background white so it can actually take on different colors. And I've also centered it using my mask centered, which, to explain this really quickly, I don't think I did earlier, it has this. This is what you're actually taking the auto crop from. The auto crop then crops it by setting all these values. This crop then takes the X and Y size. Escape center is permanently on so that no matter what sizing it is, it'll always be set to the center of the cropping. You're able to use a transform in between those, and then the very last one takes everything from the first crop, so the one that actually gets the auto cropping, and then this is the one that we can optionally make it keep the center, so that if you end up moving it around the screen inside of the crop, you don't have any like weirdness happening. But it's centered now, so if you were to adjust the size, it's going to actually adjust the size of everything from the center of the images instead of off to the side where I originally drew our little outline. And what you can do is, if you want to have multiple different types of confetti falling down, make multiple of these, plug them into like copies of these two, and then you can have as many of these as you want. I believe there may be a way to randomize it as well. Maybe something that you have to get back to me on. You may also just have to have multiple emitters, like do this exact same setup and just duplicate it over how many different designs of confetti you want. And you can merge them with a P merge, and then you're able to have multiple confetti cannons. What we want to do is come into number and guesstimate whenever we want the button to be pressed, right? So probably we want the confetti to start falling maybe around here. We want to keyframe, go forward one frame, keyframe, then go forward a couple of frames, and then keyframe. First keyframe is going to be 0. Second keyframe, I think we're going to keep it 10, and this keyframe we're going to make 0. So what's going to happen is it's only going to generate 10 over maybe a couple of frames. It looks like it only generated 10 once. So let's actually extend out this last keyframe out a bit more so it gradually goes down as it adds more and more over time. We can do it maybe out to there, maybe even a little bit closer. Or we can also do another keyframe 1 frame before this and set this to be 10. So now it'll be strongly 10 every single frame until this frame, and we just fall. So we can do, instead of it just falling like that, let's come into here, go to region, change this to be a sphere, put it straight in the middle, so that it originates from the very middle here. Let's make this a bit bigger. We're going to controls. We're gonna make lifespan 999, but in a future video, we're going to make sure lifespan is the size of the comp. But that's going to be part of a different video, because that's, you know, we're not in the mindset of macro right now. When we're in the mindset of macro, then we'll talk about macro stuff. But for now, we're just looking at DaVinci Fusion stuff. A bit of velocity, and let's make velocity a little bit high. Make angle about 90, and that's going to put it straight up. And then it's going to start falling back down. But we want, not that much velocity, maybe only about that much. We can make a decent chunk of variance in that. Then we will also want to change angle for this one to be a little more to the left, where it's like leaning over to the left, and then make our angle variance, I don't know, I'll make it a little high so we can have some confetti going in a bunch of different places. So it doesn't look all like uniform, like it's all coming from the same place. All right, that looks pretty good. If we were to play this though, it does kind of look like confetti, but we don't have enough strength. So let's add some more strength in there real quick. Now let's just add a little bit more to our strength here, so that our confetti is not just flying off into no man's land. Yeah, so if we play it there, we're not quite coming out of the bounds of our button here, which is what I'm looking to do. So let's actually decrease strength a little bit, and maybe increase the velocity and increase that angle a tiny bit. Play through this now, we can see it comes out to the side. It doesn't quite look like confetti yet, and we'll fix this in future videos. But we're gonna copy this P emitter, make an instance of it, right click angle, de-inst, and we're just going to make this angle the opposite way. So we're going to plug everything together so we can actually see what we're doing. And we're just going to flip the angle to be over to here. And there we go. One more thing, just so we can see difference between them a little easier. De-instance the group. And let's just make this more of a blue. Now, if we were to play through this, we can see confetti pops out on both sides. Looking pretty good. So we're picking up right where we left off last time with our little non-animated template before that we made before. All we really have animating is this confetti, which we're going to be changing as time goes on. I want to start animating the mouse because that's when we're going to be able to tell when our other animations are going to start happening. And I think what we're going to do is we are actually going to animate it from nothing and then coming up, so that you don't have to animate it later on with like Magic Animate from Mr. Alex Tech. We come into here after the merge one and just add a transform node, which we can do by doing shift space and typing in XF for the short form of transform. And every node has a short form, by the way. We can get our transform one here, and we can see this controls everything all together. And we're going to have everything centered around the middle, because I think that works just fine for our needs. I think what we want to do first is make sure that our mouse is in the dead center. It's not quite. Let's move it over some here. Let's add a grid. If we come into here and right click, we can come down here to guide, and we can find a bunch of different guides to add. So if we press show guides, we can see a bunch of the like default preset guides. We can see right where our center is, which is what we want for this case. We're going to kind of estimate it. It doesn't have to be exact because it's a little bit tough to make it perfect when you come down to this kind of stuff. So we're going to estimate maybe a little bit more to the right and maybe a little bit up. Actually, maybe a little bit more to the left. And I feel like that's probably around the center. And we're doing this, by the way, not just because we feel like it. We do feel like it, but because this is where the center point of our animations are going to start. The very center of this frame is where things are going to start coming from. So our button is going to probably happen. I'm probably going to have 2 stages of animation. We're going to have the mouse come in, and then the button is going to come in right after the mouse. So the mouse is going to come up. It's going to probably twirl off to the side so it has enough room to reveal where the button is. The button comes in, maybe a similar reveal to what we have when we're changing the button. We'll take a look at that today. And then we want the mouse to come up, click the button. The button's going to shrink, pop up, bounce back to its regular size. And while it is coming up from the in, it's going to release all the confetti. And the confetti is going to fall throughout the rest of the animation until it is done. I'm glad we have all that understood. So today we're just going to be looking at everything besides the confetti part. We will be putting the confetti where it needs to go, but we're going to be ignoring how it looks because it doesn't look very good right now. So to animate these, we can simply do keyframes. So let's start from the very beginning, put down a 0, and let's make this keyframed, and let's do, usually the more the merrier. We're on a 24 frames per second timeline, so we're just going to do a half of a second right here on 12, and we're going to put this up to 1. And this is going to just scale everything up to 1. We're going to make sure that this has a transform as well, right before, or right after, I mean, the button code, or not the button code, but the button nodes. And we're just going to make sure that this is scaled down to 0 for now. What happened? Wait, no, seriously, what just happened? Did you guys see it? I know what happened. Okay, so if you don't know what happened there, I scaled down the button, but if you look at this merge from the cursor, it's connecting into this as the background. So if we were to preview this, it's not going to have anything. It's going to have the mouse in it still, but it's not going to have its full background because of the sizing right here is causing it to be messed up. We can see if we preview any of these nodes before this, it exists. If we preview this node, it's not there because it's in a different place. So what we're going to do, instead of having our background 1 being way down here, I think we're going to have our background 1 be a part of this area down here. So what we want to do, I'm going to actually make sure that everything is facing in the same direction. So I'm going to turn our particles upright to where we're matching these. So nothing's on the bottom except for our background. So we're going to quickly do that, and I'll show you how I'm going to adjust it for everything else. Okay, now everything is actually facing upwards instead of downwards. This just makes everything look a little bit cleaner. Also, between episodes, it'd make everything look a little bit easier to read, so you can see where all the inputs and outputs are heading to. If you still can't follow it, be sure to watch the previous video. And if it's a little bit too fast or too slow, put it on the correct speeds for you, just so that you can learn at your own rate. This episode may also be a little long, so be hunkered down for this one, because we're going to be animating a couple of different things in a couple of different ways. Right now, we have everything leading into each other and then leading into the background, which works. The only problem is we're setting everything as its previous size. Like everything in here is set to the size we made the backgrounds for our little borders, which could be helpful in certain cases, but what we need right now is a solid background that does not change. So what we have to do is put everything over this background. And we can do that by starting here, by putting this into the green input and then putting this out to the output. And now we can see that our mouse has returned to the visual media out. So there we go. Now we have everything is being based off of the 1920 by 1080 instead of it all being based off of this 1304 by 1324 size. Now these are being scaled correctly. And this one does not have to be scaled to 1920 because we are doing that border effect. And keep in mind that these also have their own scalings. Now they may be 1920 by 1080 just because that's how these systems work. That's how polygons and render nodes work. So when you have those, they're going to, by default, be outputting as the regular size. You can always change that with image right here. I'm going to scoot these a little bit closer now that we have all that. Okay, now we can accurately scale everything and things aren't going to be freaking everything out. Cool. So we can go back to our animation and we can take a look at this. And we want to ignore the spline for now. We're just going to quickly take a look at what we want this animation to do. We want it to have an angle, and we want it to end here, but we want it to start, I don't know, maybe at 180, just do like a, as it makes it bigger. I might do that reverse, so I might do negative 180. And then what I would do is I'd come and do the splines, I'd select the two, select the keyframes, I'd press S to smooth them, and then I'd figure out like the best ways to do this. And we can always select all of our controls, press T, and this brings up our ease in and ease out controls. And we can just drag this number to give us some values. And this is good for just smoothing out animations, but obviously you can do other stuff too, which we are going to be doing with this mouse. But this is just to show you the example for using the keyframe structure. So if we were to play this now, we can see it has a nice smooth animation. If we were to put this on a different timeline, and if we wanted to have it animate out for whatever reason, like if we want to come down here about 5 frames, I think that's about 5 frames away. and then we try to animate it back out, we may encounter a problem. First off, there was the confetti still, but then we're going to ignore that. And we're going to do negative 180 again, so it goes out the same way. And now if we were to do this, well, it is a little faster because I didn't do that right. I did 5 frames instead of 12, because I didn't think that through. Let me fix that. Estimated 12 frames. I don't know how many I just did, but it's around 12, I'm sure. Yeah, and then we can put the curves on that and everything like that. But if we were to extend this now, and the user were to use this in other projects, at the end of the regular comp, it's going to animate back out. So to fix that, they implemented a keyframe stretcher node, and you can add it, and what it does is it will take your animations and let them run, but then when there's no keyframes, it'll just sit still and nothing will happen. So we gotta figure out where our keyframes are happening. We're gonna look at any of the nodes that are keyframed, or look at the last keyframe in the nodes, figure out what frame that's on. So this one's on frame 12. I'm gonna do, yeah, so this needs to be how long the comp is. So we want this to be 0 and want this to be 220, since that's roughly where that's at now. Then we want this to be the last frame of our keyframes. So we want this to not be 12, but maybe 13. So we have 1 frame after our animation happens, and then it'll just stall. It's not that it matters that much. I just like to have a buffer frame just in case. Then we got to figure out where this other keyframe is on here, and we can see it is right here at 105. And once again, if we do 104, 1 less than this time, we can see it's going to work just fine. If we come over here to our timeline, run through it. Let's actually put this back on 120. Yes, that's what fixed it. Okay. So I had that wrong. Since we made the animation on the 120 frames length comp, which is like 5 seconds comp, then it needs to be that number, not the new number that you just dragged it out to. So if you're on this screen, you just do like undo, and then that's your new accurate frame number, which is 190. And if we were to play through this on any different length, it would also have the same keyframe. Let's go ahead and remove our guides. We don't need these right now. And these are really good. But they have a lot of different problems. There are various reasons why you shouldn't be using keyframe stretcher. For one, the nodes themselves can be really, really buggy, but there's also ways to do keyframe stretchers within the nodes themselves. So if you have a node that has animations on it and you want to use the keyframe stretchers, all you have to do is right click, insert, and find keyframe stretcher right there. You add that, and then you can set up the same stuff you just did. So if you set this to 13 and then set this to 104. And now if we were to do this on anywhere else, it would be doing the exact same thing, but only on the sides now. So if we extend this, we're going to see something different happening. We're going to see when it hits this point, it's going to spin, but it's not going to zoom out until the very end. And I do recommend, if you do want to use the keyframe stretcher, do it on the control itself, because that avoids a lot of bugs that can pop up. It also is especially helpful since each animation can have its own ending frame. So you don't have to worry about if you have one node animating at the very beginning and only at the very beginning. You don't have to worry about it like waiting until the very last keyframe for it to stop trying to animate, or whatever it's going to do in that meantime. You know, however you want to think about what the keyframe stretcher does in your head. But essentially it just drags out that last animation until the end of the comp. But we can get that exact same effect with something else. So what we're going to do is we're going to just remove all these animations because we don't need them. And we're going to actually end up adding anim curves. So if we right click on any of these controls, modify with, come over here to anim curves, it's going to give us this maybe a little bit confusing pop-up. This is designed for any sort of animation without needing keyframe. We were to come into the spline panel and look at the lookup, we can actually see the curve that this animation is actually going to make. And we can edit this as well if we wanted to, but we don't have to right now. So we can ignore that and look at that later. We can change source from transition to duration or custom. It's up to whatever you want, but we're going to do duration. We can look at all this stuff in a second, but we can also set the curve speed, a bunch of different things. Or we're going to jump down to scale and offset. Scale is basically your end number of the animation. And then the offset is the first number of the animation. So since we're on frame 0, it's going to expect this to be the very first number that we're going to see. So we're going to make this 0. 0 is fine. But we're going to make the scale up to 1 instead of being at 5, because that's a little extreme for just a 0 to 1. And if we run through it, it's going to do that animation. but it's going to do it over the duration of the entire thing. It's not going to do it just once. We can fix that by coming into custom. And now we have input, which is going to be our animation control. So since we're looking at the linear version of this animation, it can extend out infinitely in either of the directions. So if we take time offset, and for example, start moving it down, it's going to infinitely move to increase past even our scale of 1. So since we are working in a linear space right now, this line exceeds just our bounds. Like this square, I'm pretty sure is the bounds of our animation, but it exceeds infinitely in every direction. If we change curve to say easing, and we set some easings to it, and if we actually click on the correct thing, now we can see we have a curve on it. But if we set this back to linear, we can see it is an infinite line upward. Zoom back out. We can probably get rid of lookup. If we zoom out, we can see this is an infinite line scaling upward from 1. We can see it is taking our 1 value because we were taking it all the way up to 1, and then it just kind of ends because that's where the end of the comp is. If we were to change duration, or if we were to change curve to ease, we can see we get some eases. We don't have to actually do anything in here. So sine is probably the slowest. Well, let's make this none. So sine is this nice curve here. And as we keep going, we're going to have different speeds of our animation. Expo being the slowest to start, but the fastest in its prime. If we change this to also be expo, we get slow start, really fast in the middle, and then slow at the end. If we change the ending to sine, we get a very similar animation. A lot of our animations are going to look very, very similar, and then it's going to take a little bit of like customizing how it's going to look for us to get it to actually like do what we want it to do. So if we come over here and choose any of these last ones though, these are going to be a different thing. And I think there maybe is a bug because it's not changing anything anymore. Something seems to be wrong. It's not changing our curve anymore. But if we look, we can see in our animation that with back on, it goes past our scale number. It does a little bounce, then it comes back. And it's not exactly a bounce. It is just coming back. It's like it's stretching out and then coming right back in. And then we can come over to elastic, and it gives us a faster effect. If we look closely at the edges here, if you look at this green line, as it hits the edge, it will do a little bounce because it's going out and then in, out and then in until it settles. We're gonna hit bounce here, and this is more of a obvious bounce. We come into here and we're coming up from 0 to 1. We hit the edge and we're just bouncing inward until we balance out at the end. And that's the animation. I don't know why this preview has bugged for me. It's really weird because it should be fine, I would think. But yes, this is where you can see that the animation is happening. You maybe need to be zoomed out some. I don't know. It's a little bit strange why it's doing this because if we don't have any of those on, yeah, it's just not changing. It's just getting worse, actually. Oh no, I'm lagging. Okay, let's get rid of that. There seems to be a bug with that at the moment. So there's a lot that you can do with anim curves, and I will be going over a lot more with anim curves in the future, but we're going to be ignoring the actual anim curves themselves for now, just to show you how to use them. If we change this to custom, this is now basically like, it's an infinite number, but you can't go past 1. If you go and animate this across 12, make at 12 being 1, and then at 0 being 0, we can see we have pretty much the same animation we had before. If we were to, I don't know, try to make this slower. I don't know. There's a lot of ways you can try to finagle this, try to make it even better. But as you change the other values, let's get to the middle of our animation. If we change these values, like time scale, if we make this bigger, it'll make it happen faster. If we make it smaller, it'll happen slower. So if we make this 0.5, it's going to happen a little bit slower. If we offset this time, it's going to literally start the animation at a different time than what our keyframes are. So theoretically, you could animate this to be 1 second long, then you can just give them time offset, and then they can set whatever, like whenever they want the animation to happen. And then they can kind of adjust this as well to give them different time offsets and speeds and whatnot. But it's kind of more of, this is what's made to you, this is what's used to make transitions and different things like that. It'll have a whole video going over just transitions and how to make those, because those are also more complicated. But this is really cool because this is exactly what I use as my basis for anim utility. For those of you who don't know, I have a free animation plugin for DaVinci Resolve Fusion specifically. This works in both Resolve and Fusion standalone. So if you want to use it in either one, that's fine. You can get it from Reactor. You can find the link for that down in the description. I'll have a link to the Recycle Less Forms Reactor for that. And you can get it from there, and you're able to animate any control with no keyframes, and you have really easy controls you can just give the user later on. And these are really, really cool, and I'll probably go over how to make these sorts of things. But that's going to be another video on like making an animation engine for yourself, just so that I can teach you guys how to do that. Because it is a little bit complicated, because you have to first think about what you want the user to have control over for every single animation. You have to figure out what animations you want them to be able to do. If you want them to have a simple 0 to 1 scaling, like just a simple slider basically, or do you want them to have more complex animations to have like multi-point stops? We can get into all of that in future videos. For right now, let's actually get rid of our modifier. We can come up to Tools, right click and remove anim curves, and let's just reset this. Now our animations are all gone. Let's come into our transform node. Let's launch our script, which we can get down here, script, find the Fusion Pixel Studio folder that was made from Reactor. There will be 2 different folders if you have my other any other script from me. For the Reactor creates a brand new folder. I wish there was a way around that, but there's not. We can open up the anim utility GUI or GUI, and then we can start animating. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what control we want animated first. So we want to figure out size. We're going to type in size, and then we're going to select it. We can give it a custom name different from this one, but by default, it just takes the node name and then whatever control you want to animate. And this is the base name for all of the modifiers that are going to be added to that control. So we're just going to paste anyway, just like that. And we can see it automatically starts with it being at 0. We're just going to move this over here out of the way for now. If we come over here to our modifiers, we can see we have a control. If we were to run through the animation right now, it will do a 0 to 1 scale over a second, because that's what's happening. We have it starting and ending at 0. If we set this back to 0 now, and we have it ending the animation at 1, like resting at 1. We also have the length for both the in and out being set to 24. We can set this to 12. And now this is going to mirror exactly what we did before. Just like that. Now it's 12 seconds long and it ends at 12, maybe a frame after. Pretty cool stuff. But where's the animations? Like, why can't you change the curves? It's just a fluke of having multiple things added at the same time. If you come off of it and then click back onto it, you get all the other modifiers. We can get the in curves, which I just have the different drop-down options because linear was breaking in this plugin. So that's why I don't have linear on here. You can set it for both the in and out. You can undo the out, so it's just the in. You can have it the other way around. You can fully let the user remove the animations by unchecking both the boxes. Simple stuff like that. And we're just going to do this for all of the things we want to animate. And we already have this down pat pretty well. We have it just scaling from 0 to 1. If we come up here to Tools, go over here to Angle, and we want to animate this just like we did before. We search for Angle, and do the exact same method. You can see it's added it onto there, but it's not going to have any rest number because the rest number is going to inherit from the control that you're animating. And since we started out the control at 0, instead of starting it out at like -180, like we were animating before, it's going to bring in the number 0 instead of bringing in an actual different number. If we were to actually remove this from here, and then we had this set to -180, it would actually set it to that, but I don't think it's actually going to work. Yeah, because it already exists. That's why it doesn't do that, because the modifier already existed. So it didn't actually have to do anything. Click off of it, click back onto it. We can see we do have everything in here and labeled correctly. We can see that we can see what is for size and we can see what's for angle. So we want the beginning number to be -180. We want the rest number to be at 0. And then we want the frames for the length of the animation to be 12. We run through that now. It looks exactly like what we had before. We can also come into our curves and just make them a little bit cooler looking. So for the scaling, I think the size is okay to not have any special like bounce or any special animation of any kind. But for when it comes in, I feel like it should have some kind of animation for the spin. And I think we're going to do a bounce for that maybe. So if we were to run through this, I think it looks okay, but maybe not a bounce, maybe a back. Yeah. If we look at that without the UI on there, we can see it has a quick little flick at the end, which I think is a nice little touch. And as we were to play through this, whenever we go to animate this, we're going to have it move over to the side like as it's doing that little flick. So it makes it really easy to like, it just makes it a little cooler. Okay, so we also want this to be moved over as it is doing this little flick out. So we want to also find center. We can see that center actually uses XY values instead of doing a slider, but we can still animate it. Don't worry. We click on center and paste it. It's actually going to add a vector onto it instead. So a vector result is essentially converting your point value, the XY coordinates, into a slider and an angle. And this is the center point of your animation. This is the distance from the center point, and this is the angle that the distance is going to be set to. So if this is set to this certain angle, we can see where it is right here. This is the angle line. If we spin it around, you'll see that it moves all around. Let's move it up this way, and if we were to click off, click back on, find our modifiers for our center, for controls. If we were to change the start and end number, you can see that this GUI is moving all around the screen because this is where it is sliding to. So we want it to probably start around here. Let's make the length actually even smaller. We still want it to be around 12 actually, so let's keep it at 12 frames. And we're going to do, I think, halfway through the animation, while it is still partially on the screen, we're going to start by animating it. So what we want to do, probably keep it here, but then make the in-anim start be the frame we want it to start on. So we wanted to set this to 6. So this is the frame that the animation starts on. This is the frame the animation ends on. This is calculating from the end. So if you want these to match, you just put in the same number. This is how many frames from the left it is going to start. This is how many frames from the right it's going to end. So it's going to end 6 frames from the start, or 6 frames from the end. Is going to start 6 frames from the end. So it's kind of mirroring each other, just like how you would do with an actual anim curves. All right, now we can see this animation is not doing anything because there's no actual resting point. So let's bring this forward about to where it's going to need to be. So another few there, so around 18, I think. And we just want to put this where it needs to go. And we're just going to move this over to the side. And it's going to be over here because this isn't actually its final point. We need to animate one more thing, and that's going to be the angle value of this. Reset this to 0, and as we can see, as it comes out, it's going to kind of shift over. And we might actually move it, move the animation to happen a little bit sooner. So maybe not on 6, but maybe more like 3, like half that number for both of these. Click off of it so we can see it. This might be good when we actually have the other animation going. So let's go ahead and go into here. Go into vector, and we want to open up our animations again. We can always close this or like minimize it by doing that button, and then bring it back up by pressing that. And we just want to remove any control in here, and we want to just press refresh to get rid of everything that we have loaded up. This will get any new controls for the new node that you have selected, and it will also remove the name you have in here. So what we want to do is do transform for center vector angle. And I'm going all out on the name scheme here because I want to be sure that when I'm looking at this stuff later on in the macro editor, when I'm selecting all the controls, I know what everything goes to. I know that this is made for this specifically, and this is made for this specifically. This animation is doing this thing, and so on. So we can paste the animations like that, and we can see this little pop-up says, you're not connecting to anything. It did not select any control, but it did still paste it. So please connect to your name and then the name of the connection. So if we were to minimize this and right click on angle now, we want to connect to, and we want to find the only thing in here that should say connect to me. But there's a few other things in here, but don't worry about that. We find our, transform center vector angle connect to me, find connection. And then you now have that new animation engine on this control. Click off, click back on. And now we can actually change that angle over time. So I want to do 12 and 12, just like before. And we want this to be set to the exact same timings as our moves happening. Because we want over the spine of the move, we want it to first go straight down and then slowly move over to be flat to the right. So we first want this to be, I think, regular 90. So if we go, okay, yeah, that's up. So let's do -90 to turn that downward. And then this, I think, is okay at being 0. So if we were to play through this now, you can see it does kind of do a little move like that. I think actually, instead of having that at 0, we actually did move it down. And sometimes you have to go pretty big on the moves here. So let's do -20. It's going to still do a down over, but it's going to do a little bit less noticeable. Yep, we can see it just kind of moves over just like that. Simple like that. Looks really good. Now we have that going for us. We want this at the same time, maybe at around frame 6, like we were trying to do for the move. We want our button to show up. So I'm going to do the exact same process over there. We're going to refresh this to get our new node. We can see we have transform 5 instead of transform 4. We can then search for size and paste. And this is just going to be a simple scale up. We're going to have a separate node for the regular, like, bouncing, bubbly, clicked on effect. Only because I feel like having 2 different nodes for that may be more useful for what we want to do, to help us figure out, like, distinguish what each node is doing, you know? Like, this one is opening up our animation. This one's opening up our animation. Then the next one's going to actually be animating the result of the click. And then this one up here is going to be animating the result of moving and then clicking. If that makes sense. I hope it does. So we want to come into here. We clicked off it, clicked back onto it. Start and end number to be 0. Make rest number 1. Then we want the start to be, or want the length to be 12 frames for both. And we want to maybe start the animation at around 6. Oop, I broke everything. I'm so sorry. Hopefully it's okay. Not too jarring. I'll make these 6, I mean. And now we were to run through it. We can see as it places this, it does do that correctly. However, we can see a very slight problem. We can see it is also moving the button when we're moving the mouse. And that is okay. We just have to move it into here. So let's just shift click and drag this node and put it into the tree of the mouse. And we can be holding shift and dragging and then hover over the pipe to where it changes color like this, and then release, and that'll actually add it into the line. So it'll be connected. Now, if we were to run through the beginning of the animation, we can see it does what we expected it to do from the start. Good. Okay. I'm going to do some quick changes to the animation here. I want to make this maybe a little bit, make this more of a value. Yeah, there we go. So we have it opening up pretty nicely, I feel like. This is a pretty smooth opening. Then we want to, as the button finishes, maybe set for a couple of frames, like set for maybe 5 frames. So we're going to have it, it ends around 17 or 18, looks like 18. We're going to do like a good 5 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it might even do up to a nice solid 25 frame, just to make it even. And then to make our other animations, we want to come over here to the transform 3 now. So this is our mouse moving to click transform animation. And we're gonna label these things in a second. We can refresh this to get our new controls, and we can just search for something. And we're gonna do the exact same process that we did before, but on our mouse now, or on this node. So we're gonna, by the way, for when you have a vector, if you have values already set in your XY, it'll take those values and put them in origin. If you have a vector, let's just quickly show this off. If you have values all sort of skewed like this, if you were to make a vector result, it'll actually put those values into the distance and origin instead, or the distance and angle instead of the origin. That was hard for me to say. But what that is doing is ensuring that if you give this to a user, you can give them origin and they still have control over the original position of that animation without even needing the animation control. This is essentially now their new center point control for this mouse. It makes it super easy on you. You don't have to do any special work to add another node or anything. You just have this, and it's set to whatever position it is set in by default. I think that's a really cool feature. Sorry. Anyway, we just need to do the exact same controls that we did before. So we want to set these. I might do, let's do 6 frames. We'll do 6 frames for now to see if it'll work. We'll do 25 as our start frame and end frame. Yeah, so we want this to be more in the middle. So we want to change our line, our angle, and just angle this to where it looks like it is going to point at the center of our button. We don't have to make this exact. We don't have to animate the angle this time. This one's okay with being a nice linear line. But now if we make our rest number a positive number, we slowly start encroaching on that. So we want to put this a little bit past it because I'm going to change our angle again. I'm just going to change the angle down some. Yeah, I'm trying to find a nice sweet spot so that we're in the center of our button. So let's do further changes. Move it down, move that up, and I feel like that's probably a good spot. Okay, so we want to then run through our animation and figure out where we first hover over the button. So I would probably want to start hovering over not this frame, but maybe this frame. Keep in mind that the border won't actually be visible, so let's actually hide that for now. Let's make this 0. So when we first see it, it's going to show up like this. So we want to hover over probably around then. So this is when we want to change this to look like that. So we want to find frame 28. We want to animate this control at frame 28. Come into here, refresh, get the mix, because this is what that control is called. You can see it has a control name of foreground background. Select that, paste it onto there, and it's a 0 to 1, so it's pretty easy. And we can do this over 1 frame since it needs to be instant. And we can set the frame to be 28. And this only has to happen once, so we'll remove out. And now this is a simple single time frame animation. Super cool stuff. Might change the length of this animation to go from 6 to 12, so we're meeting in line with everything else, which does mean that this does happen later. If we track our happenings, we can see, I mean, that could still work. That's probably more of actually accurately how a mouse works. So if we want to keep it like that, we can. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, I think it looks fine. All right, we're looking really good right now, actually. Now all we have to do is animate the button to go in and then back out. We're not going to actually animate the cursor doing anything while the button's animating, only because I feel like that would kind of be pointless. I don't know. It takes away from the button animation, but I think right after we have it going down, I think right as it hits its smallest point, the pointer, the cursor, should go away again. So instead of going away at the very end of the comp, we're going to have it go away right after it clicks it. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay, so we're going to come into this area here and we're going to drag these over just to give us room for one more transform node. And this one is our bouncing animations. So this one's going to be refresh. We're going to get size again, and we're going to come over here to modifiers. It's to be not 0 to 1, but like 1 to 1.5 maybe. 1.5 is a little big, so we may do like 1.15. This is happening really fast, but now if we were to go into here, figure out, let's say click here, so around frame 40 is probably a good spot for the click to happen. Now we can see we have the mouse coming in. Click. We actually want to invert that, and that's my bad. We want this to be at 1, and this needs to be a smaller number than that. My bad. So we'll make this 8.5, the inverse of that other number. So we can already see it's doing the out animation because of the length of our clip. And this is kind of the beauty of it. If we play through our animation right now, we have the animation. It's happening right now. It's not great, but it is pretty much done. We can change these to be, we want the first one to probably be 6, so it's really fast, and the second one to be a 12, so it kind of has more time to bounce. We want to change the out curve to have a maybe bounce, maybe elastic. I'll look at a few options. If we were to play through it, we can see, so the reason why it's kind of stalling there is because it's waiting on the inverse of its number to happen. So it has a little pause because it's waiting for the 40 from this side to happen. And that's why it kind of stalled. And then the 40 minus however many frames it's going to take happens, and then it pops back out. We can change this by calculating this number from the start, and then putting this number to be the exact frame number that we want it to actually start on from the left. So right now it's doing both of the exact same frame. Let's make this set to about, let's do 48. That's 2 frames after the end of the animation. I feel like that looks pretty good. We can then, yeah, if we look, there's not a whole lot of stuff really happening. It's not really like animating too strongly. I might make these numbers a little bit larger, so it's a little bit more of a drastic change. So let's make this another 10 down. Let's change this from bounce to just back. Let's see. I feel like that looks okay. Yeah, I feel like it works for what we're going for. You can obviously be tweaking this as much as you want, but I feel like that looks okay. But let's go ahead and with that mouse move, that second mouse move right here, we can move that actually to be much sooner. So like right after we click, right as it starts to move down, around 43, we actually are going to change the animation to begin to remove itself at around this frame. So we're going to set the start to begin right here. We're going to set this to 43. So we're going to come in, click, and then go off. I might actually set this to be more like 45 to give it some more time. Then we're also going to come into this other one and set this size and spin animations to end and, you know, begin a lot sooner. So we want the stuff to, so we are moving off to the side, and I think at frame, I think as it hits its bottom, we want to start having it spin down, which I think also means we're going to have it start moving a little sooner. So maybe more like 40. Come into here, and we want this to start happening now. So we're going to do the exact same thing. Do that, set that to 40. The same thing for the angle. Okay. And now if we were to play through it, there we go. We're looking at a pretty smooth animation. You can obviously tweak this as much as you want. You can make it look however you want, but I think that's fine for what we need. All we really need to do now is just do the in-betweens. So we need to change this to actually fade between the two when it hits the bottom. So it's going to probably hit its bottom here. Oh, hit its bottom here, and we want this to be animated to slowly, but also fastly reveal subscribed. We want this to refresh. Let's do mix again, just like before. Add that onto Dissolve 1. And you want these to be not 12, maybe more like 6, maybe even less, depends. And we only want this to happen once, and we want this to happen on frame 45. And if we come back into our Dissolve node, we want to change Dissolve type to SMPTE wipe. I don't know what that means, but it looks cool. That's all that I care about. If we were to play through it, we can see nothing's happening because there's no actual animation happening yet. If we change this to be 1 now, it's going to come into here and do a little wipe. But I think as it hits as it starts to hit its bottom, so maybe more like 43, we want our border to go from 0 to 0.2 or 0.02. Sorry, refresh this. And this is going to be X amount. So we type in X, we just have X amount right there. Add that in there. And this should honestly be our last animation. We just want to make this rest number to be 0.02 and make everything else like really, really short. And we want it to happen only once. No, we actually do want it to go out. So we want to keep it like that. So that's fine. And we wanted it to happen on frame 43. So it's going to come down. It's going to start revealing. Then it's going to pop up. And as we can see, there's a slight problem with the border on the subscribed version. We can see that right there. Maybe it's just an oversight. Yeah, because of the different size of the text and subscribed, we need to make our image a little bit bigger. So let's make the width just a bit wider so we can actually get the full border in there. There we go. Now, if we play through this entire thing, we're going to have a really cool animation. Actually, I did miss one thing. There's one thing we do want to add, and that would be the spin whenever it actually does like its final act right here. So we want to, as it's coming up, when it's finished revealing, maybe at frame 50 here, we just want to come into the transform node and just spin the heck out of this to make it look like it's actually doing something cool. So we want to do another animation. Wow. It's almost like that's what we're doing today. So we want to take angle, if I can type it, and just add it on the transform 1. And I think that is our very final animation. Let's just go ahead and close anim utility. Close out of that. We have angle. We can come into here, set the start number to be 0 is fine, but the rest number, let's make this set it to Let's set this to a really, really high number, but maybe not like absurdly high. So it's like, do maybe 360, just a full spin. Let's see what it looks like. We may have to do a couple of those. We may have to like double that number. Let's make the animation happen over a span of 2 seconds. So let's do 48 instead of 24. This is going to happen on frame 50. Let's remove the out animation because that's not needed. And let's just take a look. If we were to look at it, it is doing a little spin. I mean, it lasts a good while, but I feel like maybe at frame 90-ish, maybe even sooner, maybe frame 80, we want the number to go back down. So we want this to be start, and we want this to be frame 80, and then there we go. If we were to run through this entire animation now, let's make this bigger, let's make this full screen. Let's see what we got. All right, I'd say there's really one thing we need to change, and that's when the confetti happens. And we can do that by coming into P emitter and changing where these keyframes are. Remove all these keyframes, and let's come into scripts and get our script again, which I have that set to be A to bring it up. So I can just bring it up with A really quickly. And it also remembers the last place you had it on, so it's really easy to keep using. Let's go ahead and search for number. And this is where things can be a little bit tough with these nodes, because there's a lot of things named number. Like number something. We want to scroll through and find the control straight up just named number. And there may be a problem with this node. There we go, number. P emitter number, paste that boy, and then we can get it over here. Click off, click back on, and we can see all the controls. And we can see even the instance node has the same modifiers, so we know the animations are being transferred over. Okay. So this is the confetti, and we want the confetti to happen as it is coming up. So right around here, as it's popping up at around frame 50, we want our confetti to just pop up. So we want this to be start and end number being 10, rest number being 0, not lasting 24 frames, but we want this to last 3 frames, I think. And we want the out to happen, I'd say like 10 frames after the in. So let's try looking at this and see what this looks like. It's not looking good. That's what it's looking like. Why is it starting at this? Because I did the numbers backwards. That's my bad. Let's do that. Okay, we come into here. Boop. We can get the confetti. Woohoo. Now the only thing with the confetti is right now is it's just taking too long for the animation to finish. But if we were to look at this, preview it over here, I'd say we have a pretty good looking animation. Like, that looks really fucking fire. And before we go ahead and call it quits, I do want to go ahead and show off that you can extend out the length of this animation. If you do extend it out, though, you'll see that certain things don't actually adapt to the length of the animation. So we can see we can have everything happening all around the same time, and it kind of just stops, but it kind of just hangs here until the very end. So the only animations that will actually be reflecting out are going to be any of the out animations you have in this macro. So this one in particular is a simple stage animation that does not necessarily have many ins and outs, but we do have the only out being the downscaling of subscribed. And maybe even a few things from the first animation that we could also remove. But for this example, we don't really need to worry about that. Pretty much the reason why some things aren't animating back out at the very end of the clip, or like adapting to the length of the clip, is because when we changed the method that the out animations were happening from being calculating from the end to calculating from the start, that essentially makes it to where it is going to be as if it is keyframed at that spot, and it will happen at that frame, not from the end that many frames, but just that frame in the comp. If that kind of makes sense. I'll try to explain it better in the future if you need help understanding it, but that's kind of me trying to explain it the best I can for you. It will extend out as long as you need, but it'll just kind of sit there. So a good length for this animation is probably ending maybe around there. It's a good time for the confetti to finish falling, and then it's enough time for like the button to zoom back out. In the last week or so, I actually came up with some ideas for what we could do for the UI. So let's go and take a look at those right over here on our new camera. So this is just my phone being set up over here, but something fun about this is I'm using the Blackmagic camera app, which means all of the footage that I'm recording will be instantly transferred to the project I'm working in for this video. So I'm gonna see how it works out. You're gonna see how it looks and works out, connecting straight over the cloud. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. But let's go and take a look at this. So I'm thinking about starting off with a tab or page called master, or just controls or transform, something like that. And this is where all of the like master transform node is going to have all the controls for it. And we're going to add that into the comp here in a minute. And it's also where all of our effects are going to go that we are going to make today. So we're going to have a glow, a shadow, and a raise effect for the user to toggle on and off. And the controls are going to show and hide for each of the different effects. We also have a colors. This is going to have us control the button colors, border colors, and mouse colors. And then we're also going to have the animations. This is going to be a little bit more bare bones. We're going to get into some more complex ideas of setting up more interesting UIs when it comes to this stuff. Because animations can be very powerful to create your own animation engine and give the user a lot of power over the actual engine itself. But we're just going to make it bare bones. We're going to give them the ability to adjust the seconds that things take. We're not going to give the ability to change how the animation works. But we will just like give them the ability to change the curves, some offsets, lengths of animations, and I think also the values that they go to. But we can do a lot more with this in the future. To get started, let's move over our media out and let's start adding just a transform node in here. So we're going to do shift space, type in XF to bring in a transform node, and we're going to press F2 to rename it to master XF, or master transform shorthand. And then after this, we're going to start adding all of the actual effects. To put the effects together in sort of like an effects layer manager, we're going to use a multi-merge node, which I think is a great use for the multi-merge node. We're going to just selecting our master FX, type in multi-merge, and we're just going to start adding our effects, which is going to be a shadow, which we're going to do a drop shadow, not a real shadow. We're going to do a regular glow, just the standard glow, and then we're going to add a raise, which I believe comes free with Resolve, I think. And then we're going to connect the output from master transform into each of these, not overlapping the connections. So each of these are getting a clean feed of the original comp. So it's getting the clean version of this. It's not getting this stacked with this, stacked with this. So if we start putting all these onto the multi-merge now by just dragging the out and dropping on top of the node, it'll auto-select which output it's supposed to go to, since these have dynamic inputs. And as we can see, we have a sunny, bright mess. What we have to do is just start adjusting our controls. And I'm going to take down threshold, exposure, and weight, and mess with decay a little bit. I might decrease glow and glow size a bit. Also disable alpha on glow. That will oftentimes on a video cause weird translucency to where you can still see through it, but it's like a wrong color. And then we also want to go into raise and disable merge over. It's going to make things look a little bit differently over here. But if we preview this, we are just taking the raise output and we're not getting the actual image. If we start to toggle these off from the multi-merge, just with the checkboxes, we can see even though there is a glow and there is a raise, you can still clearly see a shadow behind it. There's still clearly a glow on it, and there's still clearly raise on it. And if you toggle them on and off without raise, you can clearly see that they're there. If you remember back to a few videos ago, I did show off a system where you can do this exact same thing. And we're going to be doing that mixed with getting controls and everything set up for other things as well. So we're going to start setting up our controls node. This is what I recommend everybody does whenever they make a macro. If they're about ready to start exporting, create an alpha divide node. This is essentially just the settings page of every other node, and you can add controls onto this. I'm going to set it to pass through by just doing Control and P, but it also can do this with the checkbox. F2 to rename, and I'm just going to call this controls. This is going to work just as our easy controls node without having to worry about having a bunch of other controls in there for no reason. Right click, and we're going to start to add buttons to toggle these effects on and off. And we're going to just create the buttons and nothing else. So let's go ahead and start with We're going to create two different buttons, one for on, one for off. Let's go ahead and add a button for shadow on, or we can even do enable shadow to make it, I don't know, a little bit more official feeling. Do button, and we're going to make the width, the default, which is going to be 1. We're going to want it on the user page, and we are okay with having animatable and passive. Integer, we don't have to really set any of these values because these don't matter. And this does not matter either. We can go ahead and press OK. And now we just have a blank button that does nothing. If we go up to workspace, console, ignore my errors, we can see if we try to do anything with this, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to print. It's just an empty button that is doing nothing. Let's go ahead and make multiple of these. We can go into our controls, find enable shadow, and if we were to just change the ID to disable shadow, and then change our name to that, now this is a brand new button, but with the exact same settings. So that's an easy way to just copy settings from one button to another, or from any control to another. There we go. We have all of our buttons in here now, but once again, none of them do dick diddly. What we have to do is start coding these buttons. Now, if you remember, a couple of videos ago, I did go over how we do that, and we're just going to do the exact same process. So I'm going to slightly skip over this, pretty much. Go check out the video up in the iCard, I think over here, and you'll get caught up really quick and easy with all the information on that. But we're just going to skim through this information because I've already talked about it. All right, just to go ahead and show this off so that we can jump straight into doing other stuff, this is the code for turning the button on. And then all we have to do for turning the button off is copy this and then set this to true. So it's going to be set to pass through, and then set these to both be nil, not mil, nil. And that's going to just disconnect any inputs that were on, that were set before. So we can go and paste this into the two buttons for our shadow, and then our shadow should be functional. And come into our user controls, come on down here and find enable shadow. We're going to take our code from off screen, copy, go up here to execute, and paste. You're good to go. We can go ahead and press OK, and I'm going to copy the off code and put that into our disable. Now, if you were to press disable shadow, we should see this turns pass through on. So it should turn gray like this one. And then this should disconnect, and this should disconnect. So let's take a look. Perfect. That's exactly what's happening. We enable it. Bam. Super easy stuff. Makes this so easy, and that's what we're going to do for everything. So now if we come in here and disable raise, we're going to see that raise turns off and disconnects. Or enable it, we're good there. And disable and re-enable glow. Looks like we are a hunky-dory with all of our buttons. We're going to add some nests onto here really quick for our hiders. So we're going to have a hider for the enable button and for the disable button, and we're going to have that a thing for each different kind of effect. So we're going to have enable hider shadow, and then we're going to make it a label, integer, show arrow, and we're going to hide the next, we're just going to say 5 controls because we don't really know for sure. We can always change this later in the code. And we're going to change this from animatable to passive. With all that done, we can press OK, and now we are going to copy the node and hop into a text editor. Now, I like talking about how much I love VS Code, but this time, why don't we hop into something a little bit different and check out Notepad++. First, we're going to put a comma down here at the end, copy all of this up to here so we have a blank space. So all we have to do is click on the previous line and paste, and it just adds it right below there. And we're going to do disable for both of these. And now we have our two templates that we're going to be copying over and over again and replacing shadow with each of the effects. If you hold Control and drag, you can select multiple things at once. So we're just going to select all instances of shadow for these two that we just created, and we're going to replace these with just the word glow. Now, if we Control A, Control C, and go back into our comp here, let's delete our controls node right here and paste in our other controls node that we have in our copy. We can see nothing's changed. What's going on here? Oh. So many nests. And they're all labeled correctly. Crazy stuff. Now, we're going to have these visible for now. But we do want to add some code into here to make it easier to change the visibility later on. For each of these, we're going to be pasting in a single line of code. We're going to be coming in right below everything else and just pasting in IC visible equals true. And when the macro is all said and done, we'll search for this exact line and then replace true with false for each of these. And that's going to make it super easy to make your hiders invisible after you've done all your testing. And that'll make a little bit more sense as we go along. And we're going to see that nothing really has changed. We can still see all of our hiders. But just to show you what this is going to do when you actually have your controls, you can see we have all the hiders shown here, and we can see our master hider here. If we just change this top one to say false, if I can spell false without having a stroke, we can paste it, and then all of our controls are gone. But they're not gone, they're just invisible. So let's quickly actually show you how we're going to make this work. Let's go into our button code. So hop into your controls, look for, we're going to do enable shadow. And at the very end of enable shadow, we are going to set one of these values to 1 so it's open. We're just going to grab the topmost one. So enable hider shadow. This is the one that's invisible. And we're going to be doing controls dot and then that name. This is going to be calling to the controls node to the control ID of this. We're going to set it equal to 1, and that's just going to set the value of that control to 1. I'm going to press OK and enable, and we can see we have our hider now being shown. We can reset our node back to how it was so we don't have that problem anymore. And we can see all of our controls sitting happy right here. But we do want to do that for each of these controls. We do want to set those values in. But we don't want to do them in here because this can be a little bit annoying. I'm going to copy this and paste it into here. And the only thing we have to pay attention to is if we're going to be using quotation marks, we have to put a backslash right before the quotation mark. And that's really the only syntax we have to pay attention to when making code in here. But we can do sort of a semicolon to help break up the code, at least visually for us looking at it in the straight line format. And we're just going to be adding in the same code that we had in before. So controls dot and then the control names. We're going to take enable hider shadow, paste it in there and set it equal to 1. This is for raise, so we're just going to update it for raise. This is for disabling the raise. And since this is the disable raise button, we don't want to hide the disable raise control. We want to hide the enable control. Or no, we want to show the enable control. Sorry, I'm getting my terminology backwards. So this is going to be making the enable button visible after we click disable raise. And along with this, we're then going to do controls dot disable hider raise. And we're going to do the opposite and do that at 0. So when you press disable, it's going to show enable and then hide disable. Hopefully that's getting to you. We can paste it in here. And if we start pressing buttons over here, we're going to start seeing these things opening and closing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the hider for enable and put it before the enable control in our list here, which we can do just like that. And we're going to do that for disable and then for all the different effects. Make sure that you have a comma for that last entry. And let's go ahead and paste this back into the comp, and we should see that it looks like they're all open, which is good. That's what we're hoping that it would look like. Let's change all of the num inputs right here. This is how many controls each label is hiding. So if we were to just select this and do a control F, that's going to look for all of them. And we're going to replace with, we copy this, paste it in here. We're going to replace them with just hiding a single control, which is in this case the button. Now things look a little bit cleaner. Now they actually have their own individual divisions. If we enable shadow, we have the disable button shown, disable it, the enable button shown, and disable glow, disable raise, enable raise. And this is how it's going to kind of function not look, but it's how it's going to function on our macro. I think what we should do next is start making some other labels for the different things. So we're going to start with a master label. We're just going to make a label for transform. This is going to be for our master transform node. This is what all those controls are going to be going into, and we can make this just integer. Show arrow. We're just going to hide 1, just so that there's a value in there. We're going to make it passive and okay. And we're just going to keep adding them for each of these. All right, and there's going to be a couple final touches to get our controls actually looking kind of presentable. We're going to take our node once again and paste it into this file. We're going to see we have a lot more controls this time. We're going to come up to our first one, transform, and we're going to give this one actually some embedded HTML to add some style to it. In our case, we're just going to be adding some color, but you can add bolding, italics, underline, strike through. You can make it a certain header size. You can do quite a lot of things with just a single line that you have available to you. We have to go into the links name of the user control, put in a left bracket arrow thingy-majig, whatever they're called. We're going to put in font, space, color, equals, and then 2 parentheses, and we're just going to close off the front of the call, the HTML call, and then we're just going to put 1 at the end to do a / and font to just close it off. And in color, we can do a bunch of different colors. We can do like dark red, red, brown, magenta, turquoise, tan, sun, gold, maybe not sun, but you can do quite a lot. So we might do one page is blue, then the next page is maybe gold, blue and gold, and then the next page maybe X, the next page maybe Y. Make sure that your colors are not capitalized, that's my bad. So make sure that you don't have any capitals in your stuff. We should be good though. Okay. So it may look like it just been a second for you, but for me, it's actually been a little while because I had to figure out why it wasn't working. For labels, they actually handle differently than a UI element, which I was getting the other information from. Labels handle things through the stylings. So we have to put it in a P style. So it is like a paragraph instead of a header. If you wanted to make this a header, you'd change out P for H1, H2, H3, H4, and that would make it the different sizes. And we just set the style, color, and then we can put in a word for whatever we want this to be. So for instead of blue, I might change these two because I saw that they were a little bit hard to see. I might change these to light blue, just so that they're a little bit easier to see. But as you can see, it is pretty close to what I showed you before. We just have the opening and then P space style equals, and then we have a parenthesis or a quotation mark. This is using the single quote because in Lua and other languages like this one, you have to put a single quote instead of a double quote so that the string does not get confused, because if you had a double quote here, it would think that this entry would just end after equals. We have the master transform before the effects because we want the effects to be changing it after it's scaled down so that they're not getting cut off on the edges of the comp that this is being bound by. If you remember where we left off a couple weeks ago, we had just finished making this cool controls node that will toggle on and off our effects super quick and easily, and disable the nodes and disconnect them. So it's super nice and super optimized for the user experience. We're going to take these controls, we're going to hide the ones that need hidden, and we're going to assign these to the places that they need to go. First, we have a couple of noteworthy things to take care of before we jump into that, just so we can make our life a little bit easier after. Over here in text 1 and instance text 1, I'm just going to go to the instance. Let's go over here to the shading tab, and we are going to make sure that 4 is active because we're going to be taking the color controls from 4. And the fun thing about text nodes is if this tab isn't selected, it's not going to show up in your macro, even if it's no longer on the original node. It's a weird quirk of how text nodes work, and I wish they'd fix it. Don't know if it's even possible to fix, or if it's just really, really complicated and it requires way too much reworking. But either way, we have to go in here, make sure that this is selected, and we're also going to de-instance everything, because when the user would select any of these, everything is going to change. Like if we go over to subscribed, it's not going to look like this now because we just de-instanced this. But if this was re-instance, and if we jumped over here, even though we're on the instance, the base one is still changed. So we have to de-instance it, and that will work for us. Now we can change them independently. We also then have to de-instance all of the controls for image and generator. Image may not really be needed, but since it just comes with it, it's way easier to just grab this entire section and just call it a day. So we're going to de-instance all of these, come over here to gradient, and we can just de-instance the top one, and everything else will de-instance with it. We can make sure about these, see if these need re-instance, but they come from the image, so they don't really need to bother. So we're good there. We don't have to worry about anything else. I believe we are set to go ahead and start turning this into a macro. We need to start by selecting the controls in the order that we want them to appear, or the nodes that we want the order of the controls to be. We have to, if we take a look back at our little nodes over here, I still have this little note. It may have some cat hair on it because my cat likes to get up here. But we're going to start with the master transform and the effects for everything as well. So what we need to do is first select master transform, and then hold down control and select the controls node. And then we're going to select each of these individually and then the multi-merge. This is so that we can get the order of the transform node. So that's going to be at the very top. And then we want the buttons for each of these effects. Then we want these controls of each effects, and then we want the layer list from the multi-merge. And then we want to grab all the rest of these in the orders they want to appear as well. So we need to grab the button colors order, we need to grab border colors order, and the mouse colors order next. So I know this is particles, this is mouse, this is button, so I need to grab this and this. Those are for the base button colors. For the border colors, we just need to grab background 2, and instance background is going to look exactly the same as background 2, so we don't have to worry about that. To grab the colors of our cursor and mouse, we need to grab background 3 and background 5, and then grab the one border because both of the borders are the same. And if we wanted to, we could make this an instance. How about just to make things a little bit cleaner, let's go ahead and just make this an instance, because there's really no reason for it to not be. So we can just connect it like this again and back into there, and there's really no difference. We see the cursor is still black. So we need to grab our controls again because I clicked off, so let's grab everything in the same order. And we can grab just background 3 and then just this first simple border, because the other two are instance. And then we also we don't really need to grab the colors for the confetti, since the confetti is sort of random. And we'll worry about the confetti at the very end when we're with animations, because the confetti is kind of its own weird thing. I think we won't even add the controls for it because that can get really unnecessarily complicated. I wanted to completely redo how we're doing the confetti, and I wanted to make it more sparkly like the actual effect. But just due to time constraints and a few other things behind the scenes, I wasn't able to actually get onto that. But I'd love to see you guys work on that and make it your own little thing. Now we need to grab the nodes that handle the animations, roughly in the order that the animations happen. So I know for a fact that the first animations that are going to happen is this mouse zooming out. And since we want the mouse to be first on our list of controls, as we can see on our list here, which I'm kind of randomizing the order of whatever these are actually showing up in, but since mouse is the first animation that takes place, I think it makes logical sense that mouse is the first thing we see. So let's go ahead and find our mouse transitions. So this one is going to be our first moves. So it's going to be this animation here. I think that looks really good for that. We'll just grab the non-instanced version of the P emitter just so we can get some of the P emitter settings. Plus we then get the animation settings from that. Grab everything else. We don't have to grab everything in any particular order. As long as it's not a control that we want to have the user control like later on, then we can just grab it, hold down your control button, or Mac, I think maybe it's command or something. Group select everything else. It does not matter what order, rhyme, reason. Just grab the things that don't need control. Make sure you grab everything, even if you have groups or underlays or notes you want to keep, and make sure you have those selected too. Even though it's in the comp, it won't be taken. It has to be in the selection. The node in red, or what's also called the active node, does not matter here, but you can really choose whatever one you want. It's really whatever you're going to right click is going to be whatever is turning red anyway. So if we just right click any of the nodes, go into macro, it does not matter what node we right click, by the way, create macro. May take a second depending on how much stuff you have in here, but it will eventually load. Let's just start grabbing a few things from inside of here. We're going to go ahead and give this the name of My Amazing Subscribe Animation. Now let's look through everything and just grab what we're going to need. So for master transform, we are going to need to grab just the basic transform stuff. So from center all the way down, we'll even go down to edges in case we wanted to do something fancy with that, I guess. That's all we need for that. We don't need any inputs, outputs, or masks. And then we'll look at controls. We don't need the output for controls, which is trying to give us this output since it's not connected to anything. We don't need to have that though. We just need to grab our button. And the keen eyes of you have noticed there's no labels here. Let me clarify though. If there was a non-nested label, you could see it here. But because I'm assuming they don't want you to get confused with actual nests that are built into the node and your own nests, they just don't display a nest. So you have to manually re-add every single nest that you ever wanted to have in your macro. Even if you made the nest, you have to go back and add it into the code later. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's continue choosing some of these options. And then for multi-merge, we do want output 1, which is the only output. And then we just want to come into here and grab our 3 layers. We then just want to come in here and grab layer order. And I'm also going to grab layer selection. We may have to come back into this and maybe change some things because grabbing these can be very weird. Let's go ahead and just find our next stuff. We're going to go down to text to grab the colors for these. We're going to come over here to shading. We want to find where element 4 is. So look for the number 4 at the ends of things. And if there's only the 2 options actually activated, it will only show the 2 options. So we can see we have opacity 4, overlap 4. We need to just look for color and grab everything in this color section. Just jump back in really quick because now we're on to the actual animation part. If you're using Anim Utility, it's going to be a little bit of a weird process to get your controls, and I haven't mentioned this before in a video, so I thought I'd bring it up now. If you haven't heard of Anim Utility, go check out my previous video from a couple of videos ago where I actually go over animating this with Anim Utility. I think it's a great tool for preset and macro makers, just super easy. In and out animations, or even stage animations, no matter how complex or easy you want to make it. To make this into a macro, we have to do a few things. If it is a center control, so if it is a point control that has 2 different values that it controls to like put it in a certain spot, like we have our XY right here, within it's going to have a vector. And from the vector, we have to look. We want the origin. This is the original position that it's coming from. With the distance is what's being animated most of the time, and then the angle is the angle of that distance from the origin. Now, in certain cases, you'll probably want to animate angle, like we are here in this example. We can actually click on the nodes while we're looking at this window, by the way. If we look and go into modifiers and just look for our transform for center vector, we can see both the distance and angle is animated because we wanted to animate our angle swooping as we're coming in. So for this one, we just have to grab origin and we don't have to grab anything else from this. And then in controls, we can grab in and out. Those are the 2 checkboxes. You can also grab start and end number, rest number, and end number if you have separate start and end turned on. And then for in here, we'll just grab in anim length, out anim length, in anim start, out anim start from the first things you see. These are the seconds versions of the controls, not the frames versions of the control. It's a little bit confusing because you have to like look through all the labels and everything that's in here to like find the right thing. But just look for anything that's ending with seconds and you might be able to find it pretty easily. But then from that, we have everything we need to actually give the user control over the animation itself. We can also give them the label here. This just tells them whatever node and control it is. We can change this to be a certain name of the animation if we want to. Like we can call this, I'm not going to type in, but first swoop zoom out animation or something like that. Or like first zoom swoop, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And then we come into in curves and just grab in and out and out. And this is going to give us our two types of curves to give them. This is the in curve version, and then we have the out curve version. At the start of this, you're able to label these with either in or out. And it will actually show that in the export. So we can keep that as their names, and we can then actually see which one's the in and which one's the out, because it can be confusing if there's just two of the exact same thing there. An important note about this is you have to make sure that you have changed all of the nodes to handle with seconds and not with frames. What that means is we have to go into the controls now, select convert to frames, and it will convert our values into seconds. Sorry, I said that backwards. You'll click convert to seconds, it'll change to convert to frames, but it'll convert everything into the seconds versions of themselves. Now, there are occasional issues I've experienced where the buttons don't want to cooperate, and you might get an error in the console saying something like comp is nil. If this ever happens or something like this ever happens, just restart DaVinci and you'll eventually get it working right. I don't know what the issue is, if it's a button bug, if it's something wrong with my code, or if it's something just wrong with how DaVinci handles that stuff in general. I don't really know, but I do know that if you restart it, it works. So now everything has been properly converted. We just want to make sure that everything is still selected, because I believe when we press on save, we have to have things selected. Let's go up here and we can continue on our search for all of our controls. So in this case, when the dissolve is only one frame, we're only going to actually take the in-anim start, since we know that the in-anim length is always going to be one frame, and we always know that the number is going to be between a 0 and 1. We don't really need to grab anything else besides the start time and maybe checking if it is actually in animating in and out. Okay, now we're looking at the P emitter, and we're just going to grab, I think, all the regular controls for this. So for the P emitter, we're just going to grab all the start and end stuff, the in and out, and all of these. And I think that's actually going to call it a close for our animation. All right, now what we have to do is come up here, and we're gonna save as a group, I think. So we're going to group it up. We're going to make it into a macro so it's super easy to get. And I'm just going to save it as my amazing subscribe button animation, but without the button. Save that. And now let's go ahead and make a new Fusion comp over here. I want to make sure this is going to be the same length as the one before. So I'm actually going to go over here and disable that one and just go into this one. We're going to come into here and I'm going to do a shift space and I'm going to type in my. We just made the amazing one. This is the one that I made for testing. So let's bring this one in, and we're going to see we have a bunch of inputs. Why might that be? Well, most likely, they're coming from this guy. So I think I maybe grabbed the wrong things. Yeah, if we look at this, we can see this is the glow layer, this is the drop shadow layer, and this is the raise layer, which is not what we were going for, but it's not going to be too hard to fix either. So if we look at everything, we can see this looks pretty much like it's the correct order for everything. If we change these, not everything changes at the same time, so that's fantastic. If we change this to, like, say, solid color, it will actually change and then give us the 4 colors. This is the mouse color, this is the mouse border, and then here's all of our animations. Pretty cool stuff. And we can see even the spots we have, like, different amounts of things selected. It shows that. Pretty nice. Okay. Let's make this fancy. First things first, let's fix the layer list issue. We can obviously see there's no layer list in here. We don't see anything actually there. The reason for that mostly is there's nothing actually in there. So if we do enable shadow and enable glow and enable raise, we don't see anything in here, but we do see our inputs have vanished besides this one. Who knows why that one's still here? With everything in there selected now, let's grab this and open up our favorite text editor. In a new tab here, I'm just going to paste in our code, and we're going to scroll up to the top. This is where a bunch of stuff is stored, but most likely what we're looking for is something called an instance input, but it's going to probably say main input or something up here. So I think it's probably going to be near the end. That's my guess. No, okay. We can see we have main input 1, 2, and 3 right here. Let's remove these because we don't need them. All right, if we come down here, we can see we have layer order and layer selection. If we go to our other document, we can see we have layer order and layer selection. That's exactly what we're looking for. Then we have a few other layers here. We have a shadow layer, a glow layer, and a raise layer. This is bringing stuff from the layer 3 name, from the multi-merge node, so it's same node, and then it's just giving it the name of effect layer order. This, I think, isn't necessary. I think it's only necessary on either the first one or something, maybe just the first one, just like how it is for like a color system. Make sure that your control groups are the same. Since it came from the same comp, it's going to have the same control groups. So let's take these 3, and we'll just plop them right below layer section, and we're going to make sure that the groups are all the same. That looks good. We're going to select all of these now, and I'm actually going to bring in the actual macro from the files. We can see it's in the macros folder. We want to select it all and paste. This is going to put in our new code. If we go up to layer, we're going to see we have our 3 new layer options here. Let's save this. We can even close out this other one because we don't need to see that one anymore. And with this open now, if we come into here and search for that same thing, my subscribe animation, we can see we don't have the inputs anymore, and we can see we have all of our layers here. If we plug it in, we can see all of our layers are also on. So let's go ahead and disable all of our layers, and we can also see they're also going to be crossed out over here. And along with that, we're able to reorder these super duper quick and easy. If we come into the Macrofesto or the create macro window, then we can look and we have the layer order and layer selection that we grabbed from before. But if we scroll down some more, we can see we have a layer name 1. And if we select that, then that is what it's going to be grabbed and put into those slots. Okay, I think the next thing I want to do is put everything on its own page. We just want to start by putting a page, the first input of each page. So for this page, it's going to be center X and Y, and we don't even have to copy this anymore. We are still going to, because we have these disabled now, and I'd rather have them disabled when the user first installs versus having them enabled and it's just a big glowing mess. And here we're going to once again paste in our new code because this is just an updated copy, and we're going to come all the way up to the top, and right here on center we're going to create a new line. Type in page equals, and this is going to be set equals to a string of main. And that is it. We don't have to put this on any of the other controls for this page. And look at this. We're going to see we have all of those controls and some on the main page. We still have the controls page with controls on it, interestingly enough. Why are those other controls on the main page? And why is origin down here instead of with its counterparts, which is this? The reason is this is going to suck. In making anim utility and /flow utility, I have to manually set the user controls that I have onto the controls page so they're visible from there. But that also will mean that those inherent to this new macro. Let's come into here and we're going to just copy this, and we're going to go to the first section, the first input of each new page. The next one's going to be some colors. So we're going to come down here past our effects. We have glow and raise. We have our layers. And then right below layers, we have the first instance of colors. We're going to put down a page onto there and call that page color. And then we're going to type in a search for page. So we're going to highlight page and do a Control F. This works on pretty much any text editing software. So don't worry if you don't have VS Code. It'll work on yours probably too. It'll give you a search, and we're just going to search for the next one. If we change all of these controls page, this may not be in yours, or it may look different in yours, but you're usually able to also replace a certain string. I'm going to take this. This is the search, and this is what the replacement is going to be. I'm going to change all of these pages to a page called Animating. And I'm not going to do all of them all at once because there's almost 1,000 of them. So I know for a fact that most of these aren't actually on the node. We're going to do it one by one. So bam, bam, bam. But we're also then going to copy this and put it onto origin, just as an important note before I continue, because origin is the XY coordinate control that was on the same page as all the other controls. All right, right there we can see we're jumping to the next control, and we can see this is a user control that just so happens to look like the exact same setup as our other string. We don't have to change anything after this now, though. If we just press the X, we are just fine. Let's press save now, and let's see if our work has paid off. Let's bring in our new node, and we can see controls is blank. Oh, then we have main with our proper controls on it. We have colors with all of the controls on there. Then we have animations with all of the controls on there. Brilliant. Now let's get rid of controls and settings because we don't want those here. What we need to do is we need to have an active user controls section of this macro. Since we don't have any user controls on it right now, we need to create one. And we just need to create a dummy user control. So we're going to right click, edit controls. We're going to leave new control, or you can call it dummy or whatever. I'm going to make it a slider, and I'm going to keep it on the user controls. We don't have to change anything else. I'm just going to make sure that we can actually see it, and it just has a name. I'm going to press OK, and bam, that does it for us. We can copy this now, replace this text, and down here at the very bottom, by default, we're going to see our new user controls section. We're going to remove our control we put into there, and we're going to replace it with hiding the two pages. Over here, I'm going to scroll the way down and just grab my example, and we can see our two pages, which is common and controls. The settings page inside of the code is called common, so that's just what you have to call it. We're going to set their visibility to false, and we're going to set their priority to 0, which means it's not going to be seen whatsoever. We're going to select these both, copy them, bring them into here, and we're going to make sure that we have our highlighting the same sort of pattern, like how we had it over here, how we're highlighting up to this point. We want to make sure we're highlighting up to this point, so when we paste it, it just pastes in just in line. This is then going to remove the two extra pages. If we come into here and preview it now we just have main, colors, and animations, which is just how we want. This is looking really good now. Okay, next, I think what we really need is some custom icons. I think that'd look really nice. We're gonna, once again, I think this is the same code that we have inside of our document, so we're just gonna keep it in here. And we're going to go up here to Lua scripts. This is where I have all my Lua scripts stored. We're going to come up here and I'm going to grab this. This is our template that I like to use for all of my page settings. So let's come on down here. I'll press enter. So we have a new line, and we'll change this to say whatever our first page is. So we'll just say main, and then I'll add some enters into here so we can see this a little bit more clearly, and then put this back one. Cool. We can see this is saying this is visible. It is set to a priority of 1, so it's set to a pretty standard priority. And then it's set to have this calculation icon as its icon. And we can change this icon from a huge list of them. And I'm going to have a link that is a forum post from We Suck Less, from the great Andrew over there, who gave us a huge list of all these things you can do. And this also works for fuses as well. So if you're interested about fuses, you can also use these for fuses. And I'm sure you can use them for other things as well. But all we have to do for my quick little swap out example is find whatever ending we want to have as our icon. And I don't have examples of all the icons right here, right in front of me. But this picture right here is actually from the new macro creator where you're able to customize the icon, and it's super easy. But these are all the icons that you're able to choose. I cannot guarantee that they're in the correct order that they have here, but I think these are in alphabetical order. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But you can look at all of those, and when you have that software, you're able to hover over those icons and you can see what they're actually called. So we can see what they're called behind the scenes here. But controls is the regular controls page icon, and custom is the regular user controls icon, or whatever user made page is the icon for. And then all of these are pretty self-explanatory most of the time. I think for this first one, we're just going to choose transform, and that's going to be our first page's icon. And then we're going to put a comma down here at the end, and we're going to select all up to here. And I'm going to do a Control D. That's going to create a duplicate of what I already have. We're then going to make another one called colors, and we're going to look for a different icon for this one. I believe there's already some good ones for colors in here. I think if we honestly just go for the color one, that will work just fine for us. So we'll just do color. Once again, duplicate this, and this one's going to be animations. And animations doesn't have a whole lot of really good ones for it because there's not a lot of animation you can really do in Fusion, at least in the nodes themselves, not within spline panel, but there are some other curves in here. So if we look through, we can see a hue curves, which I think is going to work really good for what we want. We'll just change that out. And now if we were to save this file, let's give her another go. Now we can see we have a transform icon, the colors wheel icon, and a curve icon. So you can really quickly tell what each of these icons are for. On the edit page, these icons are not visible unless you right click and you can actually see them, so you can swap between each page if you want to do it that way. But whenever they do enter Fusion, they will see the icons, which can also be disabled if you're in Fusion just like this. You can just have labels, or you can just show the icons if you really like the icons. I think we have everything basically laid out. Next thing we have to worry about is actually making it so where we can put our labels on here. So we want to start by getting the label that's supposed to be up here. And I'm going to hop down here to our controls node, and we're going to take a look at what each thing is going to be. So in the last video, we colored these to be for each different page. So I know that these two blue ones are going to be for the main page. These two are going to be for our colors, and these are going to be for animation. So if we look, as we're hovering over this and look on the bottom left, we can see the control ID. So look over here in the code, we want to come all the way up here to the top of our document. And we're going to come in and start making our own controls. To do this, we're going to just start giving them their own IDs, not even worrying about how many inputs are on there. So we're not even going to try to follow in this input scheme. We're just going to name them what they are. So this ID is going to be the main XF label. And we're going to make it equal to instance input. And we're going to format it just the same way with a comma down here at the bottom. And we're going to make the source be, I believe, transform, comma that, and then source OP, make that just control. And that then is going to set up a really quick and easy label for our transform node. But we'll see as we hop into here, and we can see it's not there because we didn't actually set its page. We want to make sure that's actually on the main page. So we're going to take the page from this one and put it onto here. Make sure you have a comma there, otherwise you're going to have some problems. Now if we save this and take a look at it again, now we're going to see we actually have one of our things hidden. Now it's only one because if you remember in the last video, we made all of these set to 1 just so we didn't have too many or too little and everything looks too confusing. So having it just set to 1, really easy. We can see the line where it's stopping. So super, super nice. Then we're going to come down here to just above enable shadow and add the effects section for this as well. So I'm going to copy this so that we have the exact same settings to use later. And we'll come down here until we start to see our effects. We can see master transforms ending right there. Add this into here, and we'll just change this to be effect. And we'll just change the source to say effect. And we'll get rid of page because that's not needed now. Now, if we take a look at this, we'll see we have an effects. Super quick, super nice. Let's do that for the other pages as well. We can see we have transformer effects like we had before. Now we can see we have sub button colors, border colors, and mouse colors. And then we can see we have mouse, button, and particle. Next things next, let's go ahead and make our hider actually appear where they're supposed to be over here. So let's go to the effects nest, just do a search for effects, our first instance of it here, and we'll copy this so it is the same code, and I'll just paste it back into here, and let's go ahead and label these as they should be. So our first one is going to be called enable hider shadow, and we can just call this shadow hider, or maybe even shadow hider for enable shadow hider. We'll copy these, Put this down here, change enable to disable, and then change E to D. And now we have our templates for the rest of these. If we just copy this one, put it above our enable glow, change shadow to glow, bam. Makes it super easy for us to do all of these with having repetition constantly. All right, well, now we added all those. If we add this node in here now we can see we only see the enable ones, and whenever we turn them on, we can see disable, and vice versa. This is really good. This is what we want. Now let's do a little bit of work to make this a little bit more user-friendly. Let's put these controls inside of the disable groups so that when you press on enable, when it shows the disable button, it also shows all of the controls. Let's do that. Right below here, we can start to see we have disable raise, and we can see we have the start of our drop shadow. Let's grab all of the things that relate to the drop shadow node. So all the way down to here, and we'll do a cut and come up here to right after disable hider shadow. Right after disable shadow, we'll paste them in and look for our next victim. Grab glow, and let's do the same thing. And we don't have to do that for raise because raise is already there. So now, if we preview this once again, we can see all of these are where they're meant to be, but we don't hide them yet because we need to go in and change how many of these are actually hiding. So what we can do for that is we can go and search for the actual names of these. So if we search for the ID, we're going to have some result. Come into here, we'll find whatever value it's at. We don't need to worry about that. And in here, we can see where it's being used. We can see it's being set in here with a button code. Some button code is setting it to 0 whenever we're swapping between on and off. But in here, we can see we are setting it to be visible equals true, and we have it set to only have one input. Now let's count how many inputs this needs to have. So this is for the enable hider raise. We maybe actually want to look for just disable. And in fact, let's just look for everything that just is called the disable hider, because that'll help us find all of the things we need to change. So for disable hider raise, come into here, and we need to change this now to say whatever number it needs to say. In Fusion, let's do a little count. So it's already 1. We need to keep 1 because that's the button. So then we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So this needs to hide a total of 7 controls. And if we save that and just test it, we're going to see that it looks absolutely correct. If we enable the raise, now we have all of our rays being shown down here. That looks perfect, just how we wanted it. Let's do that for glow and for shadow. And with that, we can see all of our controls will hide and show whenever you press for them to turn on. Perfect. Let's do one more addition to this. Let's do our search that we did last time, where we did IC visible. Remember how we set all of those to be true, so we knew that they'd be actually visible? Let's change this now, like how we said in the last video we would. We'll just do a search and replace them all to say false. So now they'll all be invisible. And since we know there's only going to be these, and we know there's 6 of them, and there's 6 of them in this count, we can just press replace all, and now we can see all of these are now going to be hidden when we next open up the macro. Just like that, we have it super clean, and we don't have to worry about any of those nasty controls being there without actually needing to be. We can just press enable, and it shows those controls and has the disable button as its replacement. Perfect. All we have to do now is just change the lengths of these, and then we'll be good to go. We can do that for these as well, and that's super easy to do. Just as a matter of counting how many controls you have. For this case, guessing works really well. If you just guess that it's about 30 or 40, and then you're too much, back it off by maybe 10. Too little, add on another 10, and then narrow it down from there. You'll probably be rather close to it. But as you can see, I did do some mess ups around here. I'm not going to take time and fix everything, but just know that the next step is just making these a little bit longer, which is just a matter of looking for everything that has inputs set to 1. So if you look for any of these and look for their IDs. So if we look this one's effects, we can change the effects to have more or less. There's one more thing I want to show off before we end off today. Let's go back down to our user controls and let's add our own image. So down in user controls, it's where I'm going to put it because I'm not going to put it in with the rest of our controls. If we come into here, we can put in an image into where the layer list is or where these buttons are and have it inset with the controls. Or You can do something really fancy with it and put it up here in the top so it's more like the header. All right, so to bring in our image, we need to have a setup that looks a little bit like this. The most important part is setting the actual data of your image in here. So then here is we're going to be putting the base 64 to be your image. So to do this, let's go on to the World Wide Web and look for a base 64 converter for images. So just in here, I'm just going to search for PNG base 64. And we're going to probably click on just the first one. That works for me. We're going to click on a search, and I'm going to look through my downloads and just find WIP templates. I'm going to choose the smaller option, open that, and that's going to give us an image of about 250 by 38. But the ideal size for an image, and even if it's inside of your controls or inside of the header, found by a user on my Discord, the preferred ideal size is roughly around 355 wide and about 1, 2, 3 pixels high, but you can really make it as high as you want. Just keep in mind, the taller it is, the more space you're taking away from controls, so just bear that in mind. To do this, we can just either show code, copy image, or copy CSS. If we just copy image, we'll copy the correct data, so we'll just copy that. But if we show code, we'll see we have data, image, PNG, base 64, comma, and then all of the data. If we go back into our code, we can see we have data, image, PNG, base 64, and then a comma. We go out to here and just paste that into there like that. Now we can see we have our data stored in here correctly. If you don't see it in this format, go up to a view, or sometimes it's in a different place, but turn on word wrapping for your NLE or your editor for your text. Save this now, and we're gonna hop into DaVinci again and just bring this in one more time. And we'll see up at the very top, we have WIP templates, really nice and clean at the very top of our Mac. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way down here, honestly, give me a thumbs up, share it, like it, whatever you feel like you need to do. Clearly you enjoyed it enough to watch it all the way to the end. Whether it was just beneficial to you or you enjoyed my presence, thank you for joining me on this long adventure. Once again, as I mentioned before, check out the description for the other video where I make this similar macro using the new macro creator, where it is in like a third of the time, maybe even a fourth. I haven't actually recorded that video yet, to be honest with you, but I assure you it is way faster. I just made that macro that I'm going to make in that video today, and it took maybe half an hour. It's crazy fast. So I cannot wait to share that with you. It's going to be really, really cool. So once again, check that out down in the description, and check out the comparison video where I compare them as well. Also check out the live stream that I did earlier in this week on Wednesday, where I actually go over lots of different parts of this. I also released a quick start guide for the new macro creator right there as well. If you're not too sure about getting the new macro creator, you can also get the free light version as well. It is very minimal, but it just gives you a taste of the increased production value that you can get from the new macro creator. But all right, thanks so much for joining me. I had a great one. I hope you did too. And I'll see you in the next video. See ya. Happy animating. I did like 3 people's different outros. That was weird. Okay, bye.